This is Navigating Cyber Risk podcast with me, John Riley, and George Usey as your hosts. Join us as we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new and ever-changing cybersecurity mandates. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Navigating Cyber Risk with your host, John Riley, where we explore the challenges faced by executives as they grapple with new cybersecurity mandates. Today, we've got another great episode, and we've got this amazing guest. He worked for the likes of Capital One Card as ISO implementer and senior manager, licensed in generative AI with Microsoft and LinkedIn. He's an author, coach for people trying to break into the cybersecurity field. And today we're introducing our special guest today, Christophe Foulon. Welcome, Christophe. Thank
you so much, John, for having me.
Glad to, and I love the microphone and everything, the look. I mean, now this is what we'll call this the bearded podcast from now on. How's that?
That's great. Well, I'm a podcaster myself, so gotta have that podcast mic and environment.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're just going to jump right in here with our main question, which is, how would you explain that difference between, especially to an executive, of what's the difference between like cybersecurity and what cyber risk is?
Well, cybersecurity is the act of understanding and securing digital assets within your environment. Cybersecurity risk is the positive or negative risk of doing business within a threat landscape. So if you want to, say, go and do Bitcoin mining, there's a certain level of risk in having to secure your Bitcoin assets in a wallet, as well as the hardware needed to do the mining. So understanding the risk in that is one set of equations. Now, if we say pull that back to something like pharmaceuticals that others may understand better, the risk is more around securing the patents, the research, the trade secrets, the clients that you're working with, the grants that you might be getting from the government, and how you're doing business. And you don't want your competitors to see that. You might not want the market to see that, because that might reveal too much or too little about how you're attacking the problem. So trying to secure your information to ensure that there is the right level of confidentiality, that there's the right level of availability to who needs to see it, when they need to see it, and then to ensure that there's the right integrity around, is the information correct? Can anyone alter it? If it has been altered, can you detect it?
So what I heard is that the technology part of it is the cybersecurity piece of it, but there's more risks when it comes to cyber, as far as maybe as you said, the patents and some of the other things that are still risks that people maybe aren't considering.
The security part is the use of the technology to conduct businthat's. The risk part is the conducting business, because you can avoid the risk by not conducting the business, and that's risk avoidance. So you can totally avoid it. You can transfer it by, say, using a cloud provider to transfer some of that risk, because now they're the ones that are deploying the technology stack and helping to secure the technology stack for you, or even going as far as using a cloud service provider to host the software for you as software as a service, and they're doing even more for you. So you're transferring even more risk over to that service provider. So it's all about the amount of risk that your organization feels comfortable in operating the technology and how they want to deal with that.
Yeah, and definitely if you're using a SaaS provider, check and make sure that they're certified and that they're doing the things that they need to be doing to protect your data.
Well, that's a good point, John. So ultimately, the client is always responsible for access control and protecting the data. And as much as your SaaS provider says that they have reliability and availability, you still need to be responsible for data backups. Even if they provide backup services, you might still want your own backup somewhere else or in another medium. So keep that in mind. Even if your cloud service provider has that, you might want your own backup in some fashion or another if this is a critical business service.
Absolutely. All right. So, what is the most significant cybersecurity threat that you see that is facing that are facing companies today?
I think when it comes to what a lot of companies are grappling with today is the rapid deployment of generative AI solutions, both for internal use as well as the use from threat actors. So, from the use of threat actors, they're now able to scale their operations, whether it's from phishing campaigns, deep fakes, faking phone calls from your CEOs, faking videos to imitate your CEO and scare the market, and not having a good incident response plan as to how you would deal with that, how you would react from a PR perspective to things like that is something that a lot of companies have not considered. And then on the internal perspective, with the use of generative AI, a lot of companies have not realized that you're already using it. And if they are putting data governance controls around, okay, if we're going to use it, how are we going to put controls around it? What data are we going to allow to be processed by generative AI? And if we're going to allow generative AI in our organization, will it be processed in our organization? Will we allow it to be processed outside of our organization? And then what level of trust do we let stakeholders assign to any of the output? For too much that I've seen today, stakeholders assume that all the responses from generative AI are 100% truthful and they trust it. And we've seen lawyers go to court and provide briefs that have citations for made up case law. And you're going to find that if your stakeholders are not verifying citation, verifying numbers that are produced by these generative AIs, you're going to run into trouble. So you have to teach your stakeholders that if they're using generative AI, you have to verify the outputs, and or when you're training your models, refining your models, ensure there's a level of quality QA that you're doing before you let it loose to your larger organization, where you've validated that the input is at a error rate that is acceptable for your organization, or a risk level that is acceptable for your organization.
And when you're dealing with AI, I think that there's a number of things, AI policies and different things that we're looking at. I mean, you had mentioned, some of the content and the other things that are being shared with some of these, large language models, sometimes internally, sometimes externally. Understanding the difference between that, and then definitely checking the results of where that comes from. So that makes a lot of sense.
I think the other thing when it comes to that is, if your AI is making decisions that have the potential to cause public harm, it is your duty to ensure that there is no bias in the AI, or you're aware of any bias in the AI, so you can remove that bias in the decision making, either before it makes a decision, or remove the bias after it makes the decision and you change the output in your final product.
We're going into an interesting time. All right.
Yes.
So If you were the CEO or when you're talking to CEOs, how do you think they should prioritize that cyber risk threat? What priority should they put on that compared to running their business, making sales, bringing in new things, right? There's all these things. So in the priority list, where do you think that generally falls?
Well, I saw a study from McKinsey that kind of looked at the emphasis placed on companies, large companies, because they're working with McKinsey, of their use of AI over the past 20 years. And it was trending around 80%. And the use of companies using generative AI, and that's been over the past 5 years, and it went from 65 to 70%. But the impact that it's had on overall stock price or overall outputs has been fairly minimal. And I think that's because organizations are still very green in understanding what they can use AI for. And AI is still very green in regards to it's still, we can call it a mature if then model. So we need practitioners to understand, okay, what do we want the AI to do? Do we want it to compute these things and make a decision? But we need to understand how the decision should be made first so that we can create the right model to make that decision. And oftentimes, organizations don't have the thinkers that need to be able to make that decision so that they could get the right model in place to do so. And I think that's why the net impact from AI has still been so minimal. While so many people have been talking about it, it has a lot of potential, but it hasn't caused a lot of impact as yet. So there's a lot of potential for automation. There's a lot of potential to improve things, but we're not seeing a lot of impact as yet.
I was reading an article the other day where a company had basically let go of a number of their staff members in the idea that they were going to replace them with AI. Not too much, maybe a month later, they ended up hiring many of those people back, and I think that's because the hype around AI is high right now, and kind of like the internet was going to take all of our jobs and everything else back in the day. There's definitely a portion that AI will help with or bring to fruition as it matures. But I mean, the AI model, the AI that's there, although it looks great on the outside, is still being trained. I mean, there's a lot to be fixed and learned from the current AI models, and they'll be replaced over and over and over again until it looks something similar to what we've had with like Web 3.0 and different Web 3 and different things like that. So it's going to be an interesting journey to see how AI changes that and changes that landscape. I do think that we are at the cusp of that. Uh, just like we were back in like 1995 when you know I was using not Mosaic as my web browser, and
Yep.
there's all of you know 50 websites that you could actually visit. Um, So I think that that's kind of the same situation that we've got with AI right now. I think there's a lot of people that maybe are jumping the gun a bit, but and opening themselves up to that risk. But ultimately, there will be a lot of significant changes that happen over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And it's happening much faster than the internet happened, I would say.
I think it will happen a lot faster. I think we just have to be a little more programmatic in understanding what we want it to accomplish so that we can accomplish it. Realize that it's not a replacement to humans, but an augmentation tool to humans. We still need humans in the loop to ensure that it's not doing the wrong thing and use it to amplify the skills of the human doing the role.
Kind of like when I've seen the video where the person can scan like this huge thing and see the changes or some difference between four different panels, and yeah, that just amazes me. You need that person to be able to find those problems with AI when they do those. Those types of skills will probably be extremely valuable in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we're talking about AI and how that's working. How will that impact cybersecurity? Positions, and if AI is attacking you, and you're using AI to stop the attacks. And I mean, are we just back into an arms race of AI on both sides for trying to stop these attacks?
I think if we take a step back and we look at what is the internet, what are cloud services, they're essentially everything as code. So they're a big data problem. And what is AI good at? AI is good at tackling big data problems. So, yes, I think AI will eventually get good at finding the patterns that vulnerabilities are, identifying these patterns, chaining together these patterns, and then either exploiting them if you're a threat actor or recommending mitigations if you're a blue teamer. There's already a LLM that has been trained to do things like this. White Rabbit Neo is an example of that. And it's already, I think, close to 2 years old, but in using it, it amassed a huge amount of vulnerabilities, a huge amount of fixes to those vulnerabilities, and then it can scan websites, it can scan outputs from error codes and repos and make recommendations on what you can do to fix it. And I've sat around a table with CISOs that have used it with their team to augment their skills. And I've also heard from CISOs that letting this loose on the world is going to allow threat actors to also augment their skills. So, yes, it's going to be an arm race on either side. But I think for defenders, we have a little more knowledge about our environment. So we have a leg up. A threat actor, there was always the saying that a threat actor only has to get it right once, but they get it wrong many times. And the many times that they get it wrong should be red flags to us that we should be hardening our defenses and preventing those attacks. So those flags going up that you're trying to attack us should be warnings that, hey, you're coming in via this way, start to look at this type of attack this way. And using AI could be a tool to help us harden defenses in that way.
And I think there's some, even with AI, there's bias, but I think there's also some people bias, right? So, I mean,
Yes.
if you're a network engineer and you're looking at the network traffic, you may not be paying attention to some of the things that are happening at a desktop level, for instance, right? So,
Yes.
and sometimes what I've seen is that the network engineer will put 4 firewalls in place to make sure that the network is secure, but then leaves the no antivirus on the desktops, right? Because of the focus and the need for that.
And then PowerShell goes wild.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where, some of these frameworks can help a customer understand that, maybe I don't need to have the 4 firewalls. Maybe I should actually put the antivirus on the on the machines, or spread it out a little bit more so that I'm a little more well-rounded and more protected.
Yeah, speaking of frameworks, I mean, we have the zero trust framework that has been something that the industry has been promoting as a least trust approach to it. And I know a lot of companies have been using it as a marketing term and saying that their solution is zero trust compliant or a zero trust solution. But if you use it like a framework instead of a one click solution, you have a better approach. and then you can go about it the right way. And there's a great book. I don't have it right now, but from the author of the Unicorn Project, he created one in a similar way for zero trust. And it walked through how a project team would tackle solving a zero trust problem during an incident and how they would go about addressing least privilege in that way. And it's a really interesting read.
We touched a little bit earlier about like incident response. So tell me, from your perspective, what does that cyber disaster journey look like? I mean, if you're an executive and you've just been hacked, and somebody's stealing your sensitive data, what does that look like?
Identify, detect, contain, remediate, recover. The NIST framework. First, let's start with ensure you have logging before anything happens. Trying to turn on logging in the midst or after an incident has happened won't provide you as many benefits. And recently done some IR with companies where they might have had an account takeover, fish being sent from an account, targeting their CEO and things like that. But you can't do much backward tracking in how it happened if you didn't have logging to begin with. So ensuring that you have visibility into your environment is one of the first things that you should do. Having visibility and not looking at it doesn't help either. So either having someone on your team that is trained to look at your logs, to at least know what type of logs to look at for these types of sensitive information. And if you don't think your organization is ready enough or mature enough for that, work with an MSSP to do that, where they can augment your team and provide that security monitoring for you. They can then escalate events like that to you and help you with that incident response and remediation. From there, you want to ensure that you have good backups and test your backups, because if you have good backups and they've never been tested and you attempt to do a restore and they fail, you just backed up a bunch of dead data that doesn't help you in an incident. I've walked through several situations asking leaders, okay, so when's the last time you set up a BCDR plan, actually doing a backup and restoring it to full functionality? And most of the times I hear crickets. So ensuring that this is something that is within your business tolerance and ensuring that you're backing up critical business information as well as systems so that you can be able to restore them in the event of ransomware, in the event of a cloud provider going out or a server dying, so that you can restore it on another server and have that go up really quickly. This is something that your team should be doing on a regular basis, as well as documenting the steps to do so. Oftentimes, this documentation is tribal knowledge. It is undocumented. It might have only lived in the head of the person that set it up, and they might have left the organization 2 years ago. Everyone else has just been supporting the application running. And if they needed to rebuild it from scratch, no one knows how to do it. So if that's the case, you might want to go back in and attempt to rebuild this documentation. So if you did have an incident, you can rebuild your application from scratch and quickly.
I completely agree with that. I think that the recovery plan also needs to include some context for maybe PR from an executive standpoint, right? I mean, you hit a lot of the technical pieces, but understanding that if you've lost customer data, you're probably going to have to say something. You're going to have to go out there and talk to people, let them know, and that's a better opportunity to try and not make mistakes, I guess.
Yeah, legal, PR, regulatory. If you have any regulatory governance, as well as ensuring that you're connected with your regional FBI or CISA contacts. One of the things that I also do, I am the chapter InfraGard president of the InfraGard NCR chapter, which is a nonprofit organization that collaborates between the FBI and private sectors to ensure that critical infrastructure can partner with the FBI. They know who their contact is. They can get information to prepare and respond to an event, as well as know who their private sector coordinator is so that they can reach out and be able to coordinate quickly if there is an incident with their critical infrastructure organization.
Prep, and more prep, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, so Christophe, tell us a little bit about you. I mean, who are you? How'd you get here? And tell us about your company and how you're doing things.
I started out just loving computers. Grew up in the Caribbean, fell in love with computers at a internet cafe, hacking together and buying myself internet time by being a sysadmin and a break fix person for the internet cafe. Eventually, decided that I was going to make this into my full-time career. Loved helping organizations make things more secure as well as functional. So transitioned to the dark side of security. Ended up mostly on the consulting side, focus on coaching cyber executives because I've found that consulting is one approach, but I love coaching because it engages the executive into the solution versus just recommending what the company thinks the best practice might be or the industry best practice might be, but truly involving them in what the solution should be for their organization. Currently, I work for Quisitive, but I also have my own LLC, CPF Coaching LLC. I do a podcast breaking into cybersecurity. I've written a couple books on how to develop your cybersecurity career. So I'm a little bit of everything.
Excellent. And so what are you currently working on that you're most excited about?
I think what I'm really excited about is just my journey into helping more executives with their advancement of their AI initiatives, developing data governance frameworks. I know it doesn't sound flashy and exciting, but really helping organizations get back to the basics so that they can then use that AI automation and see the advancements that they can do is really exciting because you then can see that growth and maturity over time. And I see that growth and maturity when I coach individuals, and I love to see that. So that's why I use coaching as my approach to it.
Excellent. Well, so if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would that advice be?
I would have started my own company a lot sooner to do coaching on the side, as well as started my security career a lot sooner. I always felt that it was so out of reach, that security was something that was too hard. And I was always doing security from the beginning. I was always focusing on making things safer, enabling users to do things in a safe manner from the beginning. But I didn't think that was security. I thought that was just general system operations. And I think that was a blocker in my head. And so if I were to go back to my younger self, I would have started my security career a lot sooner.
I think I probably would have done the same thing. It definitely was a change in moving from sysadmin to security and everything else. And so I agree with that. So we like to give our audience like a one good action item. And so what's a one piece of advice or a tip for reducing their cyber risk that you would give to an executive?
I would say go out and ensure that you have visibility into what AI your organization is using. If you think your organization isn't using AI, you're probably wrong. They're using it some way. If it's Grammarly, if it's ChatGPT, they're using it some way. So be more proactive and try to understand what use cases they're using it for, and decide as an organization how you can put governance around it for the appropriate use cases, and where you should put controls around organizational data versus casual generative AI use, so that you can set acceptable use policies for your stakeholders.
And then be able to enforce those. It's one thing, and we always used to say it was one thing to have a policy, it's a second thing to actually enforce it. So.
Well, having visibility is the first step. I mean, if you don't have visibility, you can't even have the data to make a risk-based decision.
Absolutely. So, Christophe, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me at ChristopheFoulon.com.
Excellent. Perfect. All right. Well, that's pretty much it, everybody. And I appreciate Christophe being on the show here with us. The audience, thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something today, laughed, tell somebody about the podcast. And it's been another great episode of Navigating Cyber Risk with your host, John Riley. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, John.
This was another amazing episode of Navigating Cyber Risk, powered by Omnistruct. Show us some love by subscribing and sharing today. Reach out to us with any comments, questions, or ideas about future shows by emailing us at podcast@omnistruct.com. Until next time, remember, governance is not a technology.